Welcome, everybody. I am Mike Tresca. I'm your host for our monthly CAR-PGA virtual sessions. It is February, and we are coming up very fast on March. And a couple of housekeeping items before we talk to, I'm very excited to talk to our guest. But it is, if you're paying attention and you are a CAR-PGA member, and if you aren't, this is a good time to join. We are in elections. So every year, in January, we ask for candidates for elections, and in February, we vote on them. And by elections, we mean the board. So, although I'm currently committee chair, as chair, I am named from the board. So it's not sort of a hereditary position. It doesn't go from year to year. It's renewed every year. And so is the board membership, which is huge. We really rely on that as both turnover and hopefully some healthy new folks coming in and sharing their new perspectives. So we're pretty excited. I will tell you there are more candidates for the board than there are roles. The board can support five. That's intentional. That number is on purpose. And we absolutely encourage you to take a look at the voting and participate. And if you haven't and you go to the CAR-PGA website, you can see that on there. It's under literally it's board voting 2025. It's the last link in the top. And if you go in there, you'll be able to vote. So we ask you to you can only vote for five. Pick your top five. And as I said, there's actually more people. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. So we have seven folks up for it and only five spots, which is fantastic, and well earned. So I'm excited to see that. They're in the newsletter previously that we shared. We have made it clear that the bios for each person. So if you need background and information on anyone, including myself, we you can absolutely have that. And if you have questions, David Millions runs the voting, and he'll do that. I'll tell you that early voting is pretty good. Our members are around 60, and we have about 20 folks who have voted so far. I think a little bit more than that. We do get, unfortunately, a lot of spam. So yeah, we're actually at 70, over 70, almost 80 members. So that's about a third to a fourth of our membership. We'd love 50% to make sure we're truly representative. So if you haven't voted, one more time, we really encourage you to do so. So that's one thing, just from a housekeeping perspective. We wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that because it's pretty important. It's probably one of the most important things. And as I'm often fond of saying, the really way you determine brand health or company health is by if people vote. There's lots of other ways that you can do things, and the stakes are not particularly high. But having you all share your perspective is really, really critical because the board determines the direction of CAR-PGA, and CAR-PGA obviously then that board determines the chair of this role. And I've been in the role for a while, so we're always happy to see turnover, myself included. So pretty excited about that. The other thing we are starting to talk about is that if you are on the board, we're going to expect to meet once a quarter. We've been meeting once or twice a year. That's not enough, frankly, and things are changing fast enough. So we're looking forward to that as well, which is to have more outputs and more information. So more to come on that front, but vote, vote, vote. And again, that's CAR-PGA, car-pga.org, and then you'll see the vote at the top. Also want to welcome Andy. We have a new member. We've actually been, and Maryanne, and Maryanne just joined, so we have two new members. So Maryanne is going to be our guest as well. But we actually have two new members. So welcome, Andy and Maryanne. We do, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, we actually will do a roundup of all our members at the end of the year. I had mentioned earlier that I'm on Blue Sky, and Blue Sky has been enormously successful in getting us visibility. So we're getting on average 3 to 4 people a month, whereas we were hopeful to get one a month. So it's clear engaging on Blue Sky is working. We're also on Facebook. We're also on LinkedIn. And obviously we have our YouTube channel. So that is our not nearly as exciting, but happy to share moment in time. I don't normally talk this much about housekeeping, but we do because of the time frame we're in. And this February, we have a guest. And our guest is Maryanne. Hello. We're going to make it so we are both on
Hey.
the camera. There we go. Hi, Maryanne. Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
It's good. I'm excited. It's always weird because I don't know if I'll be here next month. doing this. I think I will continue no matter what in terms of the videos, but it is sort of an interesting time because the voting is going on. So we're excited to see the results, and we'll certainly announce them by video as well in our next session. But thank you for
Vote early,
joining.
vote often, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But thank you for joining. I think, like as you said, we've probably talked a while. You certainly have may have come on and off our list. So I'm finally glad to have you on here.
Huzzah!
And we made it. Sometimes I schedule these things months and months in advance. I don't think this was too far out, but I appreciate you taking the time. This is not always an easy time for everyone.
Yeah, so I'm a middle school teacher and I'm a mom of many teenagers. So we will see how many, and also many pets. And we have a house guest. So we'll see how many of them manage to make it through the background in the next hour. We'll do people who
Can we do
live in
bingo? Can we do
housing.
bingo? And
Yep.
like, there's a
Mhm.
cat, there's a dog, there's a child, there's a teenager, there's
There's three rabbits in the background. That's why I have it blurred.
Uh, okay,
Guess
I
they're more
gotcha. Yeah,
entertaining
that's
than I
fine.
am.
That's fine. I have two cats, and they semi-frequently decide to participate. We'll see if that happens. I think they're busy, and my kids are at Taekwondo today, so I'm in the clear for the moment. So welcome again. So Maryanne, we had talked about this. Normally, what we do is sort of take us, ask you to take us through your background in terms of gaming and how it bridges to where you are today. So if you'd like to sort of give an overview just to introduce yourself.
Sure.
Besides the pets and the children and the house guest, that'd be great.
Yeah, so my name's Maryanne Cullinan, and I recently got a PhD in education in using role-playing games in middle school settings so that all sorts of diverse learners can be successful. And I'll talk more about that later. So I am not someone who did a lot of role-playing games as a child. And I was a girl in the 90s. And I'm from rural New Hampshire. And in rural New Hampshire, the girls weren't invited to the table at that time.
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
but I'm a theater kid and I especially am an improver. And really what role-playing games are is long form improv games with dice, right? And so in 2017 or 2018, I went to PAX Unplugged and I saw a panel there called Hand Her a Sword. And it was about how you can use D&D with middle school girls for friendships and social skills. And I was like, I could do that. I'm like, I got girls. It was, Stranger Things was happening and I hadn't watched that, but I'm like, that's like becoming part of the zeitgeist. So I just went home and I'm like, I don't know, you're a girl. You want to come learn how to play D&D with me? And so we started our first group and they were called the Slay Queens. And which is a pretty rad name, but was a misnomer because they almost killed nothing. As we are wont to do in middle school. We're either murder hobos or we like to call them flirter hobos, which is when
Oh.
you see everything through rose-colored glasses.
Hmm.
And so anyway, eventually everybody was like, well, how come I can't be part of this? The rest of the girls and the boys and everyone in between. And so we started Heroes Hall after school. And that has somewhere between 35 and 60 kids each year. And we've got about 45 this year. And we meet every Friday after school to play D&D and other games, other role-playing games. And so that's sort of one track of my experience with role-playing games. And then sort of at the same time, I wouldn't have known to call them role-playing games, but I was doing role-playing games or simulations or something with my students. And I had one particular group of students who were really interested in learning about Greek mythology, but really not interested in reading, which is a tough mix because you have to read the myths. So I
Yeah.
ended up, and I also had this kid who really needed something else to do and was really interested in programming. So we sort of, everybody worked together. We ended up making a role-playing game that had like sort of a randomizer part that was online that this kid made for me. And
Wow.
so that became wildly successful, and I still use it. And I became interested in this idea in role-playing games allow students who are not necessarily traditionally successful learners to take center stage and become leaders in the classroom. and allows them to think about things in a way that they maybe don't typically. And it also allows some of these kids who are incredibly good at playing the school game, the like what guess what the teacher is thinking game. It's very hard for them, and it allows them to develop a set of skills that they are not used to using, not having one right answer or having things be like a little messy, right?
Hmm.
And so I'm like, what is it about role-playing games in the classroom setting that allows for those things? What is sort of the minimum amount of things that need to happen for it to be a role-playing game that does the things that I'm looking for it to do? And that was a question I went into the PhD with. Like how can I do, I'm doing these things and they're working, but I'm sort of also throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. Like what do I have to do? And then what's kind of the gravy part? So, and that's, COVID, I spent a bunch of time doing actual play, stuff on Twitch and making friends that way and doing um PhD stuff. And I started a TTRPG group at my house so that I could practice so I would know how to play D&D. Uh,
Sure. Yeah, that's
and
great.
that still is happening and stuff. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
That's amazing. And did you feel like, I mean, so you got a lot of potential headwinds, right? You sort of have gendered, you're talking about like, let's let girls do it. But in terms of the reception to you proposing this dissertation, we've had a few folks talk about this. Herwood Groups was on here recently in the UK. So like, was everybody just like, sure, whatever you want? Or did you have to convince folks as to the value of this, or is it easier now? I'm curious as sort of what when you sort of come to this conclusion, this was something you wanted to do. How was it received?
It was fine. I mean, I think part of it too is when I'm using a role-playing game in the classroom, I'm not like, hey, so I'm just gonna like have a bunch of kids fight stuff and maybe
Yeah.
just stuff, and I don't really know what
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
right. But I say like, hey, I'm going to use a student-centered approach that helps kids develop creativity and teamwork skills and all of the SEL things we know that they have lost through COVID, and also gives them a reason to want to dive deeply into the literature that we're using, and also allows for a lot of student choice. And come on in and see how it works, right? And then people are like, okay. And I don't even say the words role playing game right away. And people are like, all right. And then they get it. Right. And in terms of my PhD is through Lesley University. It's an independently designed PhD through education. So I came in and I'm like, here's what I want to do. And they were like, all right. I do think, some people have had a lot of trouble. I'm in the Northeast, but I also think how we sort of market it and how we have to talk to people in the language that they understand, and that really helps a lot too.
For sure. So I think you're talking a little bit about parents. So have you gotten any kind of conversation where parents go, "What is this?" Or they're all pretty cool with it. Partially because
Um,
I don't. It sounds like you're not leading as D&D. I mean, there's the club, obviously, but you're sort of saying this is educational tools. Be creative.
yeah, well, first of all, I know that your organization was started kind of in reaction to the Satanic Panic, but those people are all
Right.
old, right? Like we were kids.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
God love you, everyone who's old. I know I'm getting older every day, but right. So the parents of the kids that I have now are my age or younger, God forbid. And so, right, they most of them know what it is. They have an idea. And we have some pretty clear, if anyone asks, it doesn't happen very often, but we have some pretty clear rules around, we don't use anyone's
Right.
actual,
Stuff like that.
figures of
Hmm.
worship in our game. We don't, no like Christian imagery or whatever. We don't
Right.
have drinking because it's school or drugs,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have a very robust way to talk about the X card. We use X cards, we use
Oh, you do. That's great.
lines and veils, we talk about content because that's all really healthy and important for kids to learn how to do anyway.
Right.
And so I'm happy to answer those questions. And then in terms of within the classroom setting, I'm going to tell you a secret that's going to get my nerd cred revoked, but it's that actually D&D is really bad for a classroom because it has its own agenda. And in a classroom setting, the form of the game needs to follow the function. The function always has to be, what are the skills and content that I need my students to know? And is this the best possible way to deliver that content? And sometimes the answer
Right.
is no, and then I don't use a game. But I'm not going to use D&D because I don't care about encumbrance when I'm in a classroom. I don't care, well, like, or ever, to be real.
Yeah.
But right. Or it's not, if I have another agenda of my own, then a complex magic system is not going to be useful to what my primary focus is. So I think when people's children come home and they're happy and they're successful and they're learning, it's very hard for them to then be like, this sucks. Right?
Yeah, and the feedback we've gotten wasn't necessarily the sort of that stuff, which to your point, I think is probably sure, it's somewhere. There's always somebody, but it is more wait, are you guys just gonna screw around and kill things? Like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. So it becomes the D&D cred, almost too popular now. But then
Right.
people associate, they don't understand role playing as a spectrum and they think it's just D&D. And then they're like, well, I don't think that's productive or educational. So to your point, I think that's clearly that's the right approach, which is first of all, obviously classroom based, educational based first, and the tools. That's just a tool. It's not,
Right.
hey, we play D&D, kids, aren't we cool kind of thing. So I think but that's what we've heard. We've definitely heard occasionally, not often, parents are like, well, they are learning, right? And are they fighting their way through things or are they actually learning something? And that's one or two parents they've watched. And as you mentioned that, seeing it is believing too.
Right.
So
And
that
I don't have
helps.
anything to hide. Right. And so
Yeah.
when somebody emails me or calls me and has some sort of problem with something that I'm doing in my classroom, which happens all the time because people have a lot of access to social media. Um, right. I mean, the purpose of that is because they care about their children and they want their children to be happy and safe and successful. And so do I. And so if we're on the same side, and so a lot of times if I just am not also defensive and I'm just like, hey, this is what we do. What do you think? 99 times out of 100, they're like, that's really cool. And if somebody really hates it and doesn't want their kid to do it, they don't have to. Right.
Right.
So,
Excellent. So obviously, this is, I mean, I'm thrilled for you, and I'm excited about your dissertation. So can you tell us more about the underpinnings? It sounds like I've seen this now. We're all trying to get at this. We know it works, but explaining it and the secret sauce of what it is that role playing, put D&D aside specifically, does is sometimes hard to define. It sounds like that's what you were in the pursuit of. So I'd love to hear sort of what your journey was in the dissertation.
okay. So, I gotta have to take you back a tiny bit further. And so that you can come with me on this journey, which is
Okay, bring
so
us on a journey.
okay, the journey is extended school year. So the extended school year is a part of special education. If special education is something we have in America, and I'm sure they have it in other places too, which is this idea that if you are a child with a documented educational disability, you need to have access to some specialized education that will allow you to access a free, appropriate public education in the same way that everyone else can, right? That's ultimately what special ed is. And about 8% of kids who participate in special education qualify for something called extended school year. And the idea is for this population of kids, their brains work such that if they are not in school all summer, they will forget a lot of what they learned the year before.
Mhm.
And there's a few other circumstances too, but that's the primary one. And so then they can't have access to the next year's education because they have forgotten the previous year's education. So to make it sure that they are able to have access to the following year's education, they get summer school, but it's not summer school like, oh, I failed algebra and now I have to take the credit, or I want to go take a pottery class. It's only review. And through the law, which is a federal law, the teachers are only supposed to review what kids already know. So I want you to imagine that you were a child who is 12, who already probably hates school, has multiple disabilities, is probably several years behind. All of their regular ed peers are not in school, and they're required to come to school 3 hours a day to only practice things they already know. So you can imagine that there is a population of children with um, pretty significant physical or intellectual disabilities who need to have a lot of OT and PT and speech therapies, where if you don't do any of those therapies for 6 or 7 weeks, there is like an atrophication of
Right.
skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's also a population of kids who are kind of somewhere in the middle there, and those are the kids that I did my work with. And so the question that we were trying to ask ourselves is, how can we provide a an environment in which children will not have regression over the summer and also make them want to be there, right? Because the other thing is, if I avoid regression over the summer, but then have set the children up so that they hate school so much that they're not available for learning the next school year, I haven't actually gained anything, right? I can sit anyone in front of a computer for 3 hours a day and make them practice math facts, but that's not going to make them like math more, right? So our question was, the cooperating teachers and our question was, well, how can we use a role-playing game then to provide the kinds of practice that kids need and also hopefully build skills, make them feel more confident, right? And ultimately have them walk away happier and at least okay with being there, even, right? And make it feel like something that they did that was special and not just like one more thing. Um, so, oh, I can hear some
That's easy.
teenagers
Oh, yeah. I
running
can't
around
hear
the
them.
background.
I can't hear
Um,
them.
okay, well, yes. Yeah, so the game that I designed was called Wild Magic Farms, and the idea is that you are a cryptid rancher who is farming up cryptids for conservation. So, like when they farm sea turtles and then they like let them go in the ocean, like that, but with cryptids. And so
Nice.
because one of the things we know about middle schoolers and people in general is they are much more likely to buy into things when they have choice.
Mhm.
And these children have very little choice in their life. They are being like shuffled around in their academic life, shuffled around to all these different services, classes going a little faster than they can put up with. So people are always like, do this, do this, do this, right? And so they have very little access to that sort of higher order thinking and the choice and the having to make strategic choices. And they're much more likely to just be doing like drill and kill on basic skills. And although that's important to like, that can't be everything. And
Yeah.
so basically that's kind of it for the fiction. It was a very simple fiction. And then they were able to choose any one of 12 different animals that are animals that they might be able to they'll probably encounter again, like a phoenix, right? They're probably going to find a phoenix somewhere in popular culture or literature, a kraken, a jackalope. Like these are things that American children often come across. So we're building background knowledge also through playing this game in a way that hopefully they'll use again. And so they had a reading passage that they needed to read at their own reading level. So everyone's was different. And then they had so some of them, oh yeah. So to have an individualized education plan, each individualized education plan is set up to the individual needs of the child. That's why it's called individualized. And so some kids have like oral reading goals or goals around comprehension or goals around being able to read faster, right? And so those, excuse me a sec, Dexter, go up, visiting dog.
It looked like a dog. That was a
He's
dog
down
shape. I saw that.
here. He could go around. I'm doing an interview. That'd be great. Um, so so all those different um kids had slightly different goals, and you read it, you read your passage at your reading level fluently and then answered some questions potentially, and that proved that you knew enough about the animal to receive a breeding pair. And then the pair lived on your farm. It was like a little board game. And every day, every two animals would have a baby,
Okay.
unless something bad happened, like pirates came and stole some, or it rained really hard, or it was very hot, or something like that. And then they'd either get stolen or they would be injured, so they would not reproduce or whatever. But you could mitigate those circumstances by doing math. And each math problem was its own on its own card. And then once you came and explained the math and either got assistance or um, just showed that you got it right, an adult would sign off on it and help you if need be. And then that became $1 for the store. And then you could buy things from the store that would like walls and um, private eyes that could kind of go and get your things again, or like spray, because when the settlers came to the plains, you could spray them like a bad cat to get them to go. And then there were also very silly things you could buy, like rap battles with yours truly, or a donut, because food. So, so all of those things, and then that allowed those kids, right? The focus of the game is still very much the skills that they have to do because they're all math and reading skills and writing skills. They also had to write a paragraph, and that was based on their own goals. And so they're doing those things, excuse me, to get more animals and to help their animals stay safe. And then
What a
they're
jackalope that I'm seeing here.
it is the
Very
jackalope.
cute.
The
There you
jackalope
go.
is from the game, actually. That's
Nice.
why I
Okay, I'm
got a
sorry. Go ahead.
PhD. I got a PhD, jackalope.
I love it. I love it.
But
Yes.
the
Please
jackalope
continue.
is the symbol of our game. So
Love it.
it has lots of, you can't really see, but it has lots of eyes. And um, so so half of the class, they're doing reading, everyone's doing different things. They're choosing what they want to read about, they're choosing the order they want to do things. Everyone's getting sort of individualized help. And then when they're doing math, they're working on their own math. They're choosing what to buy at the store strategically. They're getting help, like sort of planning what they're doing in their classroom. I mean, on their game board. And so that's how it worked. And so what we found was this worked incredibly well for math. And so later, when they went through and they did standardized testing in the fall compared to the year before, they had a much less regression in math. And in reading, it was like, it was hard to say. And I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. Some of them might be based on the game, and some of them are based on the fact that we're middle school teachers, but actually a lot of the population we were working with needed elementary school teachers who would really teach
Mhm.
reading. So
Mhm.
a lot of what I learned also from the dissertation was sort of there's like a lot of problems with ESY. So I have a lot of recommendations for how to help kids have a better ESY experience. Uh, but I think the thing that for our audience is really useful and interesting is that this in combination with I did some other research just sort of as a side project because I'm very interested in this, but the body of research is very limited. And so a lot of the very basic research is not there yet. We have a lot of one-off cases like I did the school game and kids liked it, right? The end. But there's very little like, here is basic research about why this works. So I wrote an article that was in the International Journal of Role Playing earlier this year, where I interviewed people all over the world who had independently come up with the idea that they were going to use role playing games in their classroom as pedagogy.
Mhm.
And my
Mhm.
question is why? Are they all seeing the same things? Why are they doing this? Right? It's not like why did they start? And what I discovered was it was all sort of happening like small I indigenously, right? They
Mhm.
were just sort of coming up with it because they had had experiences in their own lives that made them feel like this was something that was going to work. But one of the things that was happening across settings is a real change in the way that the kids understood how to win school,
Mhm.
right? Before, they had, before they were using role-playing games in their classroom, school was either a solo game that you played like you and the teacher, or a
Hmm.
competitive game against the other kids, but it wasn't a collective game. And using a role-playing game allows people to shift the way they think about learning and the way they think about taking risk and the way that they think about the other kids in the classroom. And it provides an alibi where you can take these risks, and if it's not successful, it's funny because it's in fiction, it's not a problem, right? It's not the same kind of social loss if you make a mistake in front of everyone. And so that, in combination with what happened with the dissertation, tells me that one of the things we often think that kids need is a lot of very complex fiction. But what I'm finding is that even a very simple fiction is enough to start to get some of the results that we're looking for. Right? They're all so excited about these animals and becoming farmers, and I'd ask them questions about what they were to be farmers. It's really there, it was nebulous for some of them what being a farmer really was, but they
Hmm.
could get really into this idea of taking care of animals. And that simple of a fiction was enough to start to do some of the things that they needed. And we saw a lot of sort of a collectivist shift, and a lot of these kids hadn't known each other before, and they have a hard time with social skills, and they sort of, were bonding together and becoming a pack in a way that they hadn't in the year before. So,
They work together in the game. Like, so I see
so
the vision of sort of as a farmer, but how do they interact with each other within the game
So
framework?
in the game, they didn't have to, but they began to anyway. And they began sharing resources and giving each other suggestions.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, and right, and being happy for each other.
Yeah.
And right,
Yeah.
and happy for each other's
Hmm.
successes. And like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Pirates stole my Kraken, but I'm so happy for you that it was a mild day on your farm. Right. Hey, this is what
Yeah.
happened to me. How can I help you? I don't need this resource anymore. Do you need it? Right.
We're able to share
Yeah,
across within the classroom. That's amazing. Wow. Well, that's fantastic. So, one of the things we often bump into with, and to your point, like I keep seeing, it's like everybody wants to do this. We all sort of intuitively get it. We all want to do it, and then for some reason we don't do it. One of the number one issues we bump into, and it sounds like you had a very really fertile environment for that that was structured and supported, was time. We have a lot of educators who say, "Yeah, I'd love to do this." By the time the kids get settled, we're halfway to this part of the game, and then you're wrapping up and you're done. So it's the time constraint is a killer because you're really trying to gel. Now maybe gets better because you invest more time, but I imagine the scenario you're talking about with 3 hours is a whole different animal,
it
frankly,
is,
of
but
opportunity.
it is. But I will tell you that I've taken this game and changed it to be a 45 minute a day for 45 days game, and
Mhm.
used it with remedial readers or mathematicians at school this year in my regular ed setting, and it also works there, right?
Great.
Again, I think we have to understand that these games have to be simple, or there has to be form follows function. It can't be about the bells and whistles. I cannot take 2 weeks to build a D&D character for every person. That is not worth my time, right? So it has to be something really, really simple. And maybe the warm up of the day is, what does your farmer look like? What made them become a farmer, right? And so we build these characters really slowly. Um, but most of our time has to be spent on task for the task that we're trying to do anyway. So, yeah.
Now that makes a lot of sense, and I think I talk about this often. For those of us who are gamers, we really, really want to share it with kids, often our own children. And then when we bring all these biases of like all this complexity and background, and the kid's like, I just want to do this thing. And I went through that with my kids. I sort
Right.
of overwhelmed them, and they're just like, "Great, thanks for all these stats and other stuff. Can I do that?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm adding complexity as an adult
Right.
that the
That's
kid
right.
doesn't necessarily need." You know.
Well, I have this really wonderful research partner called Jennifer Genova, and she and I wrote an article a couple of years ago that's also in the International Journal of Role Playing, called Gaming the Systems. And what we really thought about was if you are trying to build a game for your classroom, or you're looking at a game that already exists that you want to use for your classroom, again, like if I want to work on reading, I need to find a game that's heavy in reading and maybe is slightly above their reading level or whatever, but one of the main mechanics is reading, right? If I'm looking for I want to work on, cooperation, then the mechanics need to be heavy in those things. And really, I know that sounds really simple when you say it out loud, but we designed this matrix to think about if I want executive functioning skills to be something we're working on, then maybe I make a game that has a lot of pieces, right? So I have to practice that. But if I don't, if that's not my goal, then maybe I don't do that. Right. When can I take the cognitive load off and when can I add to the cognitive load? And then also, I think in a classroom setting, every single day doesn't have to be immersive in the fiction every single minute. And when I talked to people who use role-playing games in their classroom, there were basically two different ways they did it. Some people did it primarily every day as one of their main pedagogies, and a lot of people also did it like once or twice a week and then did things out of the fiction to build all the things they needed to do that one day a week where they played in fiction. Um, and so I think that's really important too. Even in a gamified classroom, I'm not spending every single minute in game because I can't. Like some things you just have to tell people or you just have to practice, right?
Right. Well, and this, I mean, this is the real. I always say there's sort of the theory of what you think is going to work, and then there's the real experience that clearly you have, which is fantastic. So,
Well, and
can you
that's
bridge
one of
us
the
to?
big,
Go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry. That's one of the big issues actually also that I'm finding is that there is this body of theory around role-playing games and LARPing, and that is not making it to people who are actually using it. So they're sort
Right.
of indigenously discovering this and kind of going around on their own. And then there's this whole body of research, and never the twain shall meet. So what a lot of what I'm interested in is like, how do we utilize these big ideas in the classroom to help us with things like time management and making sure it's really effective? And also, how do people who are actually boots in the ground say, hey, yeah, that's fine, but I got 45 minutes. What do I really need to do?
I mean, probably about a third of my videos, whenever I talk to the educators who are doing exactly this, to your point, is sort of, okay, great. Why aren't we all doing it? We all sort of agree. We all think it's great. And then, it's all these, they're not necessarily obstacles, but they're sort of variances based on what's going on the ground. And then some of it is sort of, I don't know, you got to do it. We have to see it, how it works with your kids, which may be different from someone else's kids, which, and culturally is different. And there are obviously legal requirements, and that sometimes there's reviews depending on the school and institution, how you roll it out. But that was what I was going to bridge to Tabletop EDU. Um, you co-founder, I have that right. Um, how do we get there? So this is amazing. By the way, so congratulations on the PhD then. So congratulations.
Thanks.
But
It's been
tell
a
us
busy
about
fall.
Tabletop EDU too.
Well, we just kickstarted a book and we raised $81,000, which was rad because we
Congratulations.
only thought we were going to get about six. And that's a lot of what the book is going to be about is trying to have some of these discussions about like there is like sort of a theory part that where you can kind of really understand some of the theories involved, but then there's a whole practical section of like this is kind of how we do it in our classrooms. And then there's a section that's all sort of NPCs and settings and things that maybe you could scoop up to help you do some of the things that you want to do when you don't have time to think about every single one of those things. Um, so Tabletop EDU, my co-founder, Garrett Monroe, actually asked me to be part of it. And it's this, and we're relatively new still. A lot of what we've been thinking about is this book because that's the thing we kind of wanted to start with. But it is that idea of how do we use gaming? How do we use role-playing gaming in educational settings? And so we sort of have two parallel tracks at the same time, kind of like what I was talking about earlier, right? Because there is the sort of libraries, clubs, after school activities, um, parents who want to pick stuff up. And there's a way to use role-playing games to sort of teach life lessons or do curriculum there. And then there's like the very specific, I want to use role-playing games as pedagogy in my classroom. And those that has to be a very kind of specific use. So it's kind of both of those parallel tracks at the same time. And that's we're kind of trying to bridge that, sort of get people out of that ivory tower and down into like, how do we actually use this every day in a way that's based on meaningful theory and research, and is also, going to help people and make it reasonable.
It sounds like the Kickstarter spoke. So what was the learnings from that? I mean, like you said, you had modest goals and it blew it out of the park a little bit. So what do you think? I mean, is just because there was hunger for that, or maybe it's a broader group potentially of beyond educators looking for this? What was the
Yeah, for sure. We
learnings from
have
that?
a lot of educators, a lot of librarians, a lot of homeschool parents, a lot of people who are just trying, who are sort of like what you were talking about. We have this gut feeling that this is good for people and want to
Yeah,
make it happen, right? And then
right.
there's a big sea change, I think, happening in in this hobby where it's becoming increasingly, well, I mean, it's probably always pretty neurodivergent, but neurodivergent and inclusive and, BIPOC and queer and multicultural. And so people want to do the right thing and they want to think about all of those things, but there isn't a clear path forward. And the therapy people who have been using role-playing games are probably like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ahead of us in the education department, right? Because
Hmm.
we're also trying to do a lot of the things that the therapy people are doing. I'm not using role-playing games in a therapeutic way in my classroom, but I am certainly using them for social emotional learning and cooperation and all of those things. But also, I need to teach stuff like actual content and skills too, on top of that.
Right.
So I do think that this is kind of a wild west of beginning research and where do we go from here? And it's wildly important to me that sort of our next generation of people who use role-playing games have a really inclusive table. And so that's one of the things that drives me to think about this kind of work, is not just like, yeah, it's fun and we use it in our classrooms and kids like it. And it's neat to see kids who don't pay attention in other classes come alive and kids who succeed all the time struggle a little, in a productive
Right.
way. But also, I really want kids to learn how to speak up if something makes them uncomfortable and have a yes and kind of collective fiction and be able to take feedback from other people and understand that it's not about them. They just don't like spiders or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, so
Yeah,
kind of
we
all of that.
my daughter is she does what she's told. And she frequently is shocked when, especially in the beginning of the new year, she sort of gets this story about people are like, you got to speak up. And she's like, are they talking to me? And we're like, no, there's other people who are struggling. And one of the things that shocked us after COVID was the loss of executive function. And a lot of the teachers were like, you don't understand how, and to your point, they were like, people will just fail and not say a word, struggle and never express concern. We'll put them in groups and they'll look at each other like, we're supposed to talk to each other and work together, and it was so interesting because that's a spectrum of everybody struggling with that, right? And obviously there's different skill sets and educations based on how people come to it, but it was really a challenge. And you absolutely can see how gaming, whatever form that role-playing game would take, sort of just almost through osmosis, although I think the argument is we have to stop saying that. It has to be very clear as to how it does it instead of sort of saying, don't worry, if you play it, it works out. Really helps promote all that, from, like you said, overcoming challenges, being able to speak up for yourself, having positive goals, working together as a team, all that stuff, which is really important for life. But boy, apparently, we sort of, as a society, stumbled a little bit because of it.
Yeah, I also think this is our first generation of like true digital natives, and they had this
Hmm.
big disruptive experience in the middle of their childhoods where they basically spend a year and a half by themselves on the internet. And so they have right? And so there is, they have some understanding and learnings that we don't have, but they are missing a lot of skills that
Right.
that we value at this time. And so, um, I guess I would say, I think there are a few things when I look at what role-playing games can do for kids or anyone. I think about if you are on a really high quality, well coached, and healthy sports team, you can get a lot of the same benefits. I
Absolutely.
have a daily television show with my students who every single day they put on a like 7-minute television show for the school.
Oh, wow.
And I see the same benefits for them. You often see similar things in kids right at the end of play production,
Mhm.
right? And so what are the things that they all have in common? And a lot of that is that sort of heightened, there's a heightened sense of danger, right?
Yep.
Where it's not, you're not at baseline and you're not in the red zone, but you got to perform and you got to make decisions and you don't always get it right. And that's part of it. And then you move on. And it might be embarrassing or it might be funny or it might be, but even if it's amazing, it still goes away, right? And we keep on moving on. And everyone's important and everyone's part of it. And even though like some people might have bigger parts and some people might have smaller parts, you got to have all the parts or
Mhm.
you can't do. Right. And this idea of sort of becoming more than yourself and playing a role. Um, a soccer team is a semi-structured social experience that's centered around running around. And but a role-playing game is also a semi-structured social experience where everybody has roles and people generally have an idea of what's expected of them, right? If you're like the striker on a soccer team, you know what's expected of you, or you are taught what is expected of you on the team. And it's similar in a role-playing game. And so, but not everybody plays soccer, and not
Yeah.
everybody can play soccer on a healthy soccer team or whatever. But everybody can come to the table and be part of what we're doing in in the classroom or whatever. So I think that
Absolutely. And
that's part
it's,
of it.
yeah, no, I mean, you're right. And this is one of those things where we keep going back to like, escape rooms became all the rage for a while, and we were like, yeah, that's get it. Guess what? That's the stuff we've been talking. Oops, that's what stuff we've been talking about this whole time, which is shared sense of challenge, of risk, and coming through. By the way, bonded in a way because it creates sort of the stuff that you hope you don't go through in more severe circumstances. But by the way, sports absolutely do provide that. And also clear goals and metrics where you go, if I do
Right.
this, I get this. I wish work was like that, right? Where everything was very clear, and by doing this a lot or doing this a certain way, you get this thing. That's the way you would love, all of life to be. But it's a puzzle you can address. It doesn't mean you can solve it, but at least you know you know the rules and the parameters. So
Right.
really fascinating stuff.
Yes, 100%. And there's that piece of creativity and that piece of
Right.
having to put things together on the fly and unexpected happening. So there's
Hmm.
that sort of challenge and novelty. Um, so there's there are a lot of one of the things I learned through my dissertation research is when we talk about kids being anyone being engaged in something,
Hmm.
highly engaged, there's actually four different kinds of engagement. And if you're having all four of them, you're like really in that zone, right? And so we start out there's sort of this behavioral engagement. Your body is doing the thing. You're sitting there in the classroom. That's the basic, right? And there's an emotional engagement where you are willing to participate or at least are present in the space in a way beyond just being physically present, and you're calm enough to do it, and hopefully you start to feel like some sort of emotional connection to wanting to be there and be part of something, right? That's emotional engagement. Then there's this cognitive engagement where it's not too hard, it's not too easy, it's providing challenge, I can get it, I have the schema I need. And then there's this other kind of engagement called agentic engagement, which is that idea of I can take everything I'm doing and I can remix it to make something new. And when I'm in a role-playing game, I can do all of those kinds of engagement, right? I look at that sheet and I say, oh, I have whirlwind. That is a spell that is going to really mess up these pirates. Man, my DM's going to be so pissed. Sorry, Kent, that was yesterday. Right? Or
Uh-huh.
like, oh, I'm going to do this. And you start to put things together and you have that competency, because that's the other thing is people need to feel connected. They need to feel like they have choice and they need to feel competent. And if you don't feel those three things, you aren't really available to learn.
And those are the three pillars of happiness, I think. I've read
Right,
more than
exactly,
once. So
right.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
that's part of it's called self-determination theory. I didn't make it up. And
exactly. No, it's funny. I almost remembered to say it and failed to say it. Maryanne, I could talk to you for about 3 hours, but we can't do
yay.
that, unfortunately. I want to open it up to. I see Thomas is on. Thomas, do you have a question for Maryanne before we wrap?
No, no, thank you. This was great.
Excellent. So, Maryanne, I love this. I First of all, I can't believe I missed the Kickstarter, which looks like it blew it out of the water. I mean, you said it, but I don't think I really understood it until I looked at it. 6,000 was the goal, and you made 82,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, I would love to tell you that it's all profit, but it's not.
Oh, and that's
Especially,
okay.
thank you, President Trump. We are going to have a lot of tariffs to deal with
Yeah.
to get that
Gosh.
book back home. But we, but yeah, it's allowed us to do all sorts of add a lot of things to the book, and we're really excited. Um, we're just kind of wrapping up the
I
manuscript
see
right
it.
now.
Delivery is supposed to be soon, actually, real soon. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah. I
amazing.
mean, with sort of international relations being as they are, it's, I
Being
hate to
trashed.
tell
Yeah,
you, but
yeah,
m
yeah.
might
We'll
be a
see how it
little
goes.
later in the
See how it
spring.
goes. Okay, that's why
Yeah,
God
but
made
it's
PDFs.
soon.
But yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's exciting, and I think that's, kind of we're starting with this. We have a little Discord community that we'd love to have people be part of, our Tabletop EDU Discord community. And we're kind of figuring out, we have a monthly meeting of people who run role-playing game clubs that we're sort of like
Yeah,
just,
so that's my question is how can we support you? Tell us. Pitch it all. What are the things we could engage with that to follow you either on socially or support?
so I'm on Blue Sky too as Calliope, Culliope, like the
Surely
muse.
we are connected. Are we not connected?
I don't know, but we're gonna
Really?
be.
That's good. That's
Um,
ridiculous.
and
Because I am
my
too. That's all I do is talk about it. Say it again.
It's
CAIOP.
Calliope, but with a U like Cullinan, Culliope.
Got it.
Um, and I have a little website called Calliope's Cauldron that has some of my stuff on it, but Tabletop EDU, go if you haven't done any, um, read some of the stuff that I mean, I have so many other things I could talk to you about. I'll just come back another time. Bring my friend Rich Oxenham, who made Inspirals, the sign language role-playing game. We'll come talk to you
Oh,
about
you're
that.
coming back. Well, you're a
So
member now, so we that means we know where
yes,
you
I'll
live,
just
so you
come
have
all
to
the
come with us.
time.
So yeah.
Um,
You just come whenever you want. Yeah.
but I love the International Journal of Role Playing. It's open access. It has a lot of phenomenal
Hmm.
research. Not all of it's done by us. But it's all good, even though the Japanese Journal of Analog Role Playing has an article that I wrote recently called Deprogramming Indiana Jones that's about anti-colonialist DMing with kids. And I mean I love to talk about stuff. I would love for people to check out Tabletop EDU. We're going to be running some classes and doing all sorts of stuff. We're kind of figuring out what the community needs. Um, I'm doing some more research right now about using solo role-playing games for writing with eighth graders.
That was my
And
next question. What are you doing next? So what's next for you? So you got your PhD, yay. I see
yeah.
now that I followed you, you just got your certificate. Congratulations. So
Yeah,
exciting.
finally came in the
Uh,
mail. It was
that's excellent.
very unceremoniously. I'm like, what's this? I was threw
Yeah.
it away.
I know you're
Right.
like, you just get an envelope. Hey,
Yep.
congratulations. But so what are you doing next? I mean, what's next for you?
Yeah, so that's always a good question, right? I teach middle school and I love it.
Hmm.
And I'm not in a super big hurry to not be a teacher, because apart from a lot of, well, I love teaching. I have middle schoolers. I'm a longtime teacher in a community I've lived in for a long time, and that works really well for me. And my kids are in my school, and I have a lot of access to do research with actual kids because I have this relationship with the community. Um, and yeah, so I'm using Lighthouse at the End of the World by Ken Lowry to do, which is the raddest little game, to do research. I'm writing with eighth graders right now. I'm writing a chapter about wild magic farms with some of my colleagues for an upcoming book about using rope games in general, in its intersection with disability. And I'm writing another chapter. I'm just doing a lot of writing. I'm going to the Gamma Expo next week to talk about using
Excellent.
games and games in general with game manufacturers. So hopefully teachers, we can get more games that are 45 minutes in length. Because and if the Nazis can win the World War II game, it's not history, it's speculative fiction, baby. So just some of these basic things game manufacturers need to understand.
Hmm.
And then just kind of see where it goes. I'm excited to see what the community needs for tabletop edu, and I'm excited to be part of the mission here. I feel like out of everything I do, if my students can walk away from their experiences with me and my time with them and say, walk into a game store and know if the community there is healthy, if the table's healthy, and have the confidence to say, hey, we don't have any norms here. Hey, what are our safety tools?
Right.
Hey, how do we have equity of voice here? And if they can't find it, to make their own, right? And to look around and be able to pull lots of different people into the table. I mean, that's the most important thing, right? Because they'll figure the rest of it out on their own.
They're going
So,
to save us. We need those adults because they become
that's
adults.
right.
As I often say, you know, a lot of this work happens now.
Yeah,
So we don't
100%.
deal with what we got, what we got right now.
Well, right. And
Um,
and no matter what your politics, the nature of politics right now is such that there's not a lot of listening happening. And we're
right.
not seeing a lot of role modeling from the leaders of our culture.
Totally.
And so
You
this
wouldn't
is a
fly in the classroom. Let's put it that way. As we'd say, you couldn't have that behavior with your elementary school. You wouldn't tolerate it.
oh
So
my
we've
gosh,
seen
not at
that.
all, right?
Yeah, yeah, and we have that with scouts too. One of the things. Well, I've taught game design, and I also we've I've taught the citizenship and the community badge, and it's really foundational. But it's fascinating how adults. First of all, I learned a lot, but adults
Right,
could use some of this stuff too. We just need more of it. So,
100%. So
Maryanne, you are a gem and a treasure, and I absolutely adore what you're doing, and I'm really invested in it now because I partially one of the frustrations we come out of these conversations is we can't get it over the line, right? Like you said, there's just that weird gray space. There's a lot of well-intentioned folks with tremendous passion, and there's some folks who are absolutely in the trenches, and then there's sort of this middle group, and there's a lot of them who are we're just not connecting. So I think we're going to get critical mass. It sounds like you are one of,
yeah,
I think, we're at the forefront of it.
yeah, and so I really like the thing that I love to do best out of all things is co-think problems with other people. And so if you are somebody who's interested in this work, be like, reach out to me and I will be happy to co-think with you about anything. And right, I mean, that's why I ended up getting the PhD I did and I'm doing the research I did, is because there's this gray space and somebody has to start to do that foundational work so that we can do the more advanced work. But that's the way it is with research. You can't just say bread is tasty. You have to say bread is tasty, said Baker, 1998,
Right. Yep. Build
And
your case.
And so I'm trying to start to build that case. And so the more people I know who are willing to help me build that case, too, the better. So we're always looking for
Well, we're here
collaborators,
to help.
looking
So
for
you just got a bunch
everything.
of fans. You got a bunch of
Yeah,
fans for sure.
you got
You,
me. We're team
yes,
up strikes again.
absolutely. Well, so what we'll do, I said this before we started, but we'll just reinforce it for the call. What we'll do is absolutely take your links, make sure I get them right. Sometimes I don't. We will put this on YouTube. We encourage you to share it. Now you're my Blue Sky buddy, so that means you'll find me as
Yeah,
well as Italian. Blue Sky has been more productive for us than anything,
it's
as far as
great.
I'm concerned. Yeah, and the community is great, which is I really just it's amazing to see such really great gamers from all walks of life. But
Well, and
yeah,
we used to have a really nice little community on Twitter a few years ago, and so I'm
yeah,
really in the before times, and so
yes.
I'm really looking forward to building that community with everybody. So yeah, shoot me a
I have to
line.
add you. We have a CAR-PGA starter pack, so we'll add you to that
Oh, I
as
love
well.
that. Yeah.
But yes, so thank you so much. Thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. Don't go anywhere because we'll just stop the recording, but I'll keep talking to
Okay.
you for a little
Sounds
bit.
good.
And thank you, Thomas, for joining us as well. Like I said, this will be in the newsletter, so look forward to that.
Great.
And we're looking for a new board too, so can't wait to see.
Yes.
Thanks,
Make
everybody.
sure you vote for the new board.
That's
It's
right.
important.
That's right. Thanks all. Take care.